Okay, here we go. So first question is, please tell us why you decided to apply for this position and what strengths you would bring to the board.
I've always been interested in this position. I actually ran for it some years ago, way back when Fred Stryker first ran for this position. I was also one that ran for this position. There was 5 of us who ran. I placed second in the primary and second in the general election. I want to serve on the board because I feel like I want to make a difference. I've served on many volunteer positions. I used to be on the Battleground Youth Soccer Club board for many years. I think 5 or 6 years as the treasurer and 2 years as the president. I was on the Clark County Solid Waste Advisory Committee for some years, the last 2 years as the chair. I just I'm real motivated to be involved and to try to make a difference. I don't want to just sit on my thumbs. So I think I have a skill set and experience that will be real beneficial to the board.
Great, thank you, Eldon. Adeline, since I saw you jump on, you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself to Eldon real quick?
Hi, I'm Adeline Smith. I'm the student representative. I'm a senior at Battleground High School.
Hi, Eldon.
Great. Okay, so our second question is, what experiences have you had on other boards? You've spoken a little bit to it, or in management or other leadership positions. And there's a second part to it. What are the 3 most important attributes for a school board director to possess?
Okay, as I mentioned, I was a member of the school, not school board, the Battleground Youth Soccer Club for some years, last 2 years as the president, and then of course the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. In my professional career, I have actually been a manager of people before. I have experience supervising people. So what was the second part of that question?
The second part is, what do you think are the 3 most important attributes for a school board director to possess?
I think that they have to have a vision that coincides with what the vision is for the school district, public schools. I've always felt that that kids come first, that the school needs to enable every student to reach their full learning potential. And I think that coincides with what the vision is for the public schools. And I want to highlight every, because I learned that through my years, and especially when I was going to the City University of Seattle. In fact, Troy, I was going to school with your wife for some time. I learned that every kid is smart in something. And I think a good school board member has to have that in mind. I also think that good school board member has to have multiple skill sets. They have to be a good listener. I like to practice active listening. God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth, and I think we should use them in that proportion. So I'm a very good listener. I'm a good people person. And I think that they have to have an understanding of what the big picture is. I'm a very level-headed person. I don't get riled up over anything. I do my homework. Like if I'm selected as a board member, I will do my homework before the board meetings, so I understand what the issue is. I do my reading ahead of time. Probably the third reason that to be a good board member is that the board consists of 5 people, and each one has unique talents, skills. Not all the board members are going to think alike, but to be a good board member, you have to think together to solve all the problems that come up.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So our third question is, what do you feel are 2 things the district does well and 2 areas the district could improve upon?
Obviously, the district is doing extremely well on the audits. I see that we passed for the 7th year in a row on the audits. So it shows that there's good financial management. I also feel that the school district is doing very well on keeping costs contained. I believe that we are quite a bit below the average cost per student for learning. So that's that speaks very well. It shows it's being managed very well. Areas of improvement. Obviously, the relationship right now particularly is rocky because of all the parents. Well, why did the levy fail? There's some mistrust about schools, teachers' unions. That's an area that's needs some improvement. Second thing that needs to be improved. I think coming up with the levy election, whether it's going to be in August or November, there's going to have to be a lot of thought about making sure that it's communicated out there properly. What are the consequences of a levy failing? I know that Denny has done a real good job of putting together a list of the things that are coming up that would get cut. I'm not too sure that people have really internalized that. So somehow we have to do a better job communicating that out.
Great, thank you very much. Fourth question, what goals would you like the board to set?
Well, their goals can be under a lot of areas. I'd like to see the board utilize what I call the SMART goal format. You're familiar with that, I believe.
Yep.
Where the goals have to be specific, measurable, timely, achievable, and relevant. So I'm not too sure. Any goal that the board does set has to coincide with whatever the direction the goals are for the school district. They all have to be aligned. So how you set those priorities and those goals, that's for the 5 board members to figure out what are the priorities. But I would really encourage you using the SMART goal format. I've used it many times in the professional, and it's really good format to use.
Okay, great. Our fifth question is, what kind of a time commitment can you make to the work of the board? There are additional meetings sometimes, or time to engage the community in two-way discussions about issues. Any time that might take away from work, or to attend conferences, trainings, and workshops.
I have lots of time available. I think I mentioned in my interest letter, I am recently retired. Right now, I keep busy by doing a little of this and a little of that in my retirement. I would expect that I'd be capable of spending 20 or 30 hours a week as a board member. So I don't see a problem in that. I think that's a big benefit for me.
Okay, great. Our sixth question is, tell us about your interactions with Battleground Public Schools and share with us any perceived, real, or perceived or real conflicts of interest. Did you follow me on that, or you want me to read it again?
Go ahead and read that again.
Okay, so tell us about your interactions with Battleground Public Schools and share with us any perceived or real conflicts of interest.
So my interactions with the Battleground Public Schools, 10 years ago, I spent a year substituting. I worked as a classified substitute and as emergency teacher substitute. So I've had those interactions. So back then I got to know quite a few of the teachers in all the different schools. I don't think that's a conflict of interest. I can't think of anything else, Mark, that would give me my interactions with the schools have been primarily in that role.
Okay.
I used to work for the schools.
Yeah, great. Our seventh question, do you believe that once the school board has made a decision, all board members should support the will of the majority, and why or why not?
Oh, I think that's a very important. Once the majority is voted, it's very important that each board member be an advocate of their You can't have somebody going out, backstabbing or anything. It has to be a unified voice. Every board member has an obligation and responsibility to support and to be an advocate of whatever's been decided. Very important.
Great. All right, we're up to our eighth question. Are there any particular community connections that you have or constituencies that you would represent as a school board member?
Say that again.
Okay, are there any particular community connections you have or constituencies that you would represent as a school board member?
I'm not too sure I'm following the question, but I'm representing the community from the area that I'll be a board director for. Is that? I'm not too sure I'm following the question, Mark.
Yeah, I think you got the right idea. If you think there's any other connections you have in the community other than that, then you could expand on that. But
no.
Okay.
No, it's just the community.
Great. All right. Our ninth question, and this is kind of two parts. If you are not appointed, do you plan on running for this position in November 2021 school board election? And if you are appointed, do you plan to run for this position in the November 2021 school board election?
Yes and yes.
Okay. That makes it easy. Thanks. Okay. Our 10th question, and then you'll get a chance to ask us any questions you want, so just so you're forewarned. Battleground Public Schools obtains 14% of its budget from levies. With the recent levy failure, what are your thoughts about moving forward?
Obviously, Battleground has experienced a 2 levy failure before. That was not a very pleasant scenario. I remember my kids going to school through that time period. Not something I would look forward to, but I think that we need to be prepared. And I think Denny's done a good job in putting together a scenario of how that impacts the community, the schools. That needs to be shared quite a bit out there so that people understand the consequences of a second levy failure. And I think as each board member has a responsibility to be an advocate for that. Certainly hope that is not something that happens, but we have to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the point where you get to ask us some questions, Eldon.
Sure. I was noticing on the minutes that, and this is going back to that SMART goal framework, that the board did a self-assessment survey some time ago.
Yep.
And that you picked 3 focus areas were determined, which they didn't the minutes didn't list what those 3 focus areas were. Is that something you could share what those were?
Yes, I might have to look some of them up, but the other board members can help me a little bit as we go along. And you might be interested to know that the framework we used was the SMART goals for that as well. So yeah. So I know in particular, one of the things that we set, and I want to mention that these are self-improvement goals for the board as a working group, not necessarily for the district as a whole. We have a separate time when we'll look at that for that. So these are goals that we looked at the feedback, our self-assessment, and then said, how could we operate better as a board? And one of the things is as we bring on new members, both student members, which we turn over every year, and either appointed or elected members, that we improve on that process and really pay attention to how we bring new people into the team. Mr. McCoy, you want to express yours about the student data?
Yeah, so yeah, as Mark said, these aren't like overreaching goals. These are just kind of goals that came out of the self-evaluation process. But I wanted to see us focus more on a student improvement and kind of weaving that into more avenues and more things that we do, as far as getting that maybe more front and center in some of our goals and evaluations.
You talking like student improvement overall grade point average, or
well, the one that really
graduation rates, or
was as high school graduation rate was kind of where I was coming from.
Okay.
Is and having the board maybe be more active in tracking and getting updates more frequently instead of just once a year, so that we can better adjust or react essentially.
okay. The other area, I was going through the policy manual, and I did not see anything in the manual about how procedures are for collective bargaining. So maybe it's in there, I missed it. I assume that there's some procedures or that you have policy on collective bargaining with the teachers or whoever.
I'm sure Shelley will jump in, but a lot of that's handled from
By personnel.
A lot of it's part of PERC. Our Public Employee Relations Committee sets the way in which our relationships work with our groups that we bargain with. And then it comes through a process. All collective bargaining agreements are completely different from district to district, but there does tend to be similar strains of information that come out based on what's happening in education at the time. But essentially the role of the unions and the associations that we work with is really to bargain the working conditions. So management sets the goals and the outcomes and works within those parameters. And then it's the job of those associations that represent the employees to talk about how those decisions impact the working conditions. And so working conditions, of course, are hours, times, wages, those types of things. And then, of course, we have ongoing meetings beyond the collective bargaining agreements that we work, we call them labor management meetings. And basically, they're bringing forward things that come up that impact the employees in their daily work and talking to us about the way they're impacting people so that we can try and mitigate any negative things that are happening based on what's happening in education so that people can do their job in a highly effective way. And so that's kind of the goal and the relationship that we have with our employee groups. Communication is key to that, just like it is with our community, with our board, with communication is really important to those relationships.
Okay. Let me look through my notes. I'm sure the school district is well aware of all the issues with the students coming back to the school, getting students back in the classrooms, and the levy failure. Obviously, the school board must be pretty familiar with all the growth that's happening in the battleground area. I mean, subdivisions are being built everywhere. So obviously that's going to mean more students in the future. I assume that's on the radar of the school district and the school board about capacity and all that stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, because I see subdivisions are popping up everywhere. That means more students.
Mark, we've lost you. Your sound was out. Eldon, you're exactly right. If you remember, just a couple of years ago, we did a big boundary redraw because we had to find more room in our schools for kids. And we actually changed Maple Grove, which used to be a K-8, into a primary school because we had more younger students than we did older students. So it's something we're constantly aware of. It's difficult now, obviously, because our enrollment has dropped mostly due to the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how much we rebound and where we find ourselves next year when hopefully things return more towards normal.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
also jump in, Eldon. We had a population growth plan done by a consultant, and we actually expected more growth based on that. But what has kind of happened recently is people are having fewer children. So even though there's a lot of subdivisions going in, we're not seeing, as you would normally, like traditionally, if you saw that many houses go in 10, 15 years ago, we'd probably be looking at 2 more schools. So yeah, I might be exaggerating. I'm just off the cuff, but it's but yeah, we definitely have some schools that are well above capacity, but our student enrollment's been fairly flat recently.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I had. Did you guys have any for me?
I was just going to go back quickly. There was a third goal that we had for self-improvement, and Director Hendrickson was a key one on this, on inviting in varieties of community groups to present to the board, make sure that they feel like they're heard. Did I phrase that okay, Rob?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And thanks for Sandy for putting those goals in there. But equity and cultural differences are important to relate to, and so that was a goal that we put together for that.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing those 3.
Okay, great. So board members and admin, if you have any clarifications on the questions we went over before we move on, this would be a time to ask those.
I just wanted to ask a question about your time with the Battleground Youth Soccer. You mentioned serving on the board as the treasurer and the president.
Yes.
I'm familiar with the treasurer role. As a president role, what was your responsibilities? Was it just oversight and of the organization, or did you actually get to work with the kids, or just kind of trying to figure out like what
it was mainly oversight to make sure that things were happening, but I was also a coach also. So
okay.
I worked with the kids. All three of my kids at that time were in the soccer club. This was the late 90s, and I was president from 2000 and 2001. I really remember the year 2001 because the day that we were handing out uniforms and schedules was 9/11. So sticks in my mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. Eldon, I kind of wanted to circle back, and maybe I'm not as good of a student as I once was, and maybe I missed it, but I was hoping maybe you could kind of expand more on what individual strengths you have that you would bring to the board, you personally.
Yeah, I'm level-headed. I understand that I don't get riled up over anything, or it takes a lot to get me riled up. I'm a good listener. Like I mentioned, I have 2 ears, 1 mouth. I would like to use them in that proportion. I have a lot of professional experience. In my professional career, I was a program manager for a lot of companies. And so I'm used to managing programs across different functions of people, whether it's in sales, marketing, accounting, manufacturing, whatever. So I go across the board, so I'm good at that. I was a good manager. One of the keys to management is make sure there's no surprises, which means good communicator. And I can have the time to devote to this. Willing to do it, want to do it.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Troy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Clarifying questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you again so much, Eldon. It was great to get to know you through this process. And we've got one more interview to go that will take approximately the same amount of time as yours. We'll go into executive session to compare all of those, and we do plan on coming back tonight and nominating a member and voting on that. There's a fairly short turnaround time for the person who is appointed. We've got a Monday board meeting. Thankfully, it's just a regular one and not any extra sessions to speak of, or not too much anyway. And we'll do as much orientation as we can between that appointment time and that first meeting.
Well, I hope I hear positive from you. Monday's my birthday, so that would be a great birthday present.
All right, he didn't shy away from that at all. Okay.
Oh, but one last thing though, I'd like to thank you all board members for serving. I know it's a volunteer job. You probably all put up with a lot of gruff, which you don't have to, but it just shows your dedication to the kids. So I'd like to thank you for the time and efforts that you guys put through.
Thanks for that recognition, Eldon. Okay, team, we'll go to your notes and score pages and take 5 minutes to gather your thoughts before we go to the last interview.